Hello, this is Meekiness Fan, and welcome to Please Play It, a series in which I implore you to please play it. One thing I'm trying to improve about the way I engage with video games is to not write certain ones off just from a quick glance. I'm really bad about seeing some games, immediately deciding that they don't appeal to me for whatever reason, and paying them no mind. Today's game is one that fell victim to that personal practice, and one I'm glad I experienced to help me realize I need to stop being so quick to close myself off from things I'd enjoy. Enter Hob, the Definitive Edition, which released earlier this month on the Nintendo Switch for $20. Hob initially released in 2017 for the PS4, and that's where I saw it and immediately determined I had no desire to engage with it. To give you the quickest, dirtiest rundown, Hob is a top-down game akin to a traditional Legend of Zelda experience, with a wordless narrative focused in on themes of restoration and technology blending in with nature. I'm usually not one for top-down Zelda experiences, and that was my reasoning for not engaging any further with the title. With it releasing on the Switch this month to some pretty high praise from those who enjoyed the game, I decided to put some time aside in my busy schedule for Hob's 10-hour runtime to give it an earnest chance. And I'm now very regretful that I passed on it initially. The game wasted little time in surprising me. A few moments in, your character meets a friendly robot that pleasantly reminded me of some other good robots like Bastion and Dog. You do some typical light puzzle work and come upon a cutscene where your character admires a weird creature before having its arm infected by a poisonous plant. Your robot friend wastes no time cutting your arm off and giving up one of its own for the lead to use. I was 100% not anticipating any amputation, and it immediately made me engaged. I'll say now that Hob is not a game that dishes its story out to you overtly clearly. It's told more through visuals and expressions. This isn't usually something I prefer in games, but if you enjoy putting more thought into game stories where some background elements are conveyed cryptically, I think you might get more out of Hob's story than I did. For me, liking the robot dude and hoping he found a replacement arm for himself was enough to keep me invested throughout the game. I'm a simple man. Speaking of simple, a lot of elements in Hob are simple, and I never found that to be a bad thing. For example, the game has its fair share of puzzles in the overworld and in dungeons, most of which come from box pushing or navigating an environment correctly. The game's combat is also fairly shallow, even with an upgrade system and additional moves. It never becomes much more complicated than just rolling away from enemy attacks and waiting for an opening. The dungeons aren't particularly long or depthful, save for a select few. Despite all of this, Hob kept me engaged for its entire span. It's really more about the way these elements come together pleasantly than about any single aspect shining above the rest. I think what did help me become so invested is that I really do enjoy themes of restoration in games. Taking a thing or location that is in a rundown condition and revitalizing it back to life is weirdly satisfying to me. This manifests wonderfully in Hob in two ways. The first is when you finally get to start ridding the world of the poison that took your arm and has been a thorn in your side up until that point. It feels great every single time you purge an area. On top of that, you're also rearranging the world and lifting entire segments from the underground back to the surface. It's really, really neat and feels like a much better way to unlock progression in a game of this type, as opposed to needing arbitrary items to unlock certain areas of the map. Every time an area did pop up, I was torn between wanting to see what was new and wanting to go back to places I'd previously explored to see what I could discover with my new strength and abilities. Sometimes this led to me getting a little lost, admittedly, but there are a lot of fast travel points, so I was never too far off from getting back to where I needed to be. Even so, I didn't mind getting lost too much because the game is just so pleasant to look at. I really wound up liking the way this game looks. At first glance, it was kind of off-putting, but the more time I put into it, and the more I got to know the different environments in the game, I just couldn't help but vibe with it. Unfortunately, this brings me to some negatives that I do have to share. Firstly, the game's frame rate tends to dip a lot. This seems to have happened even on the PlayStation 4 version, so I suppose it's a positive that this version holds up as well as it does on the Switch, but it's a bit jarring every time. Randomly, there's also just issues with textures loading improperly and bugging out, and sometimes it's especially apparent. It doesn't get in the way of gameplay once, but I also experienced 3 outright crashes that kicked me back to the main Switch menu. This game is immensely generous with its checkpointing, so it never cost me more than a few minutes of backtracking, but every time it happened, it definitely broke the immersion I was feeling. In wrapping up this video, I've called out some technical problems, but I do want to stress that Hob rises above them to be an experience I really enjoyed. It never once felt like it was dragging on, and I was getting upgrades and new moves at a decent enough rate that I was always engaged in its weird world. A lot of times nowadays, the best games rise to the top, and a bunch of good and great games can get lost in the shuffle through no fault of their own. By way of being put on a Switch, Hob is being given a second chance at life. Its developer, Runic Games, is no longer around, so the title stands as the last testament to a team's final hopes. That's why today I wanted to shine a light on Hob, a great game that deserves more love than it got. Please play it. Today's video was generously supported by these lovely patrons. Thank you.